Good day, Viper community. Coach Azza here, part of the Viper team at Viper HQ in London. And recently we had the pleasure of speaking and doing workshops on Viper at IDEA conference in Asia, China. And we did this virtually. So as part of this virtual conference, we came up with a brand new workshop, which was Viper for running. So how we can use Viper to enhance the performance of the running athlete. And what we'd like to do now with you guys today is share a small section of that workshop which we delivered. And in today's section, we're going to be looking at the idea of power training and strength training for running and how we can incorporate and use the Viper to enhance those training capabilities. So guys, check out the next video and we're going to be taking you through some really cool ideas, give you some motivation, give you some ideas and inspiration of how to use Viper in the best way for the running athlete. We'd like you at the end of today to be able to go out and explore more ideas yourself as well. Now, if you enjoy this series today as well, please get in contact. Let us know that you've liked it, because if you like it, we can deliver more along the same theme. We've got more information to give you, so just let us know if you want to hear it and see it. So guys, for today, enjoy the Viper Strength and Power for the Running Athlete. So we've looked at how to prepare the body ready to run or ready for running-based training. Now we're going to look at the hierarchy of needs and actual training type exercises that can help support better running performance. And we're going to start, when we talked about that slightly different hierarchy of needs, we're going to talk about power first. We're going to have a look at power and the ability to basically produce rapid and explosive force, because running itself is a rapid exercise. We shouldn't be plodding, because if we're plodding and running with a slow cadence, with a slow movement, then that's a lot of impact and a lot of gravity acting through the joints. If we can make that speed a little bit quicker, less contact time with the floor, then it's going to be better for our joints, it's going to be better for our muscles, and also better for our overall speed and performance of running. So we're looking at how we can improve our explosiveness with running. We're looking at challenging our nervous system. Running is also hugely demanding on the nervous system. So we're going to look at how we can challenge and help build up the nervous system with specific patterns for running. And this is essential that like we said, we can build a faster cadence, we can build a larger stride length, and therefore run better. So we need that plyometric and power ability. So as we take a look at our application for power, we're going to look at doing 2 to 6 sets of each exercise. We're looking at between 1 and 10 repetitions, or 1 to 10 seconds. So it's that real rapid ability to produce force, but produce it well with really good quality movement. So we need to encourage movement control at high speeds. We're looking at accelerating and we're looking at decelerating quickly. So again, we can bulletproof the body for the demands of running. So let's take a look at some drills on this video. We're going to start off by looking at a nice simple drill, a nice simple power exercise, which are pogos. So bear in mind that I may be working a little bit longer than the time frames we suggested. This is just for me to be able to clearly show some of these drills. And these pogos went from 2 legs to 1 leg, but then we can incorporate the Viper. This is when it gets really interesting, and I'm holding the Viper in different positions. These different positions will challenge the ability to be able to react and keep a good rhythm and a good cadence, regardless of what comes at me, what obstacles, obstructions, and other kind of variables come at me. From there, we then move it from a fairly simple exercise into one of my favorites, the skaters. So they're looking at some little double skaters. We can, again, like we did with the skips and with all of the other exercises, there's this element of progression to it. So now looking at a 3 skip, challenging the body a little bit more, challenging the balance a little bit more. making an effort not just to constantly scatter at this point, but actually bring about points of stillness, points of stability and balance into then power. And then once we've built those, we can then produce that constant effort skating. We know that the hips work well when they're traveling side to side as well as forwards and backwards and round and round. And a skater is a really good exercise for this. Notice we're bringing the Viper in again to enhance, to up the skater game. I've taken an offset hold, just like in our mobility drills, the offset hold is providing a little extra rotational force. By doing this, it's going to help the hips switch on and the glutes to engage by sweeping that across with the extra leverage towards that landing hip. So again, looking at some different combinations and some different holds. This time taking a wide hold of the Viper. The wide hold of the Viper is often a really simple way of increasing the intensity and demand of the Viper itself. Increasing and also challenging the ability to rotate and the ability for the T-spine to rotate. Then from there we move into hinge hops. This is my favorite exercise, building that backside power so that if you build the backside and you build the load, you can get a better explode. And we're looking at acceleration here. So we're looking at winding up the body and then accelerating. And notice we've gone from a two-footed beginning to then that single foot exercise, vital for building up running strength, stability, and power. Again, adding the Viper in just to add that little extra emphasis on the acceleration, having to drive the Viper across the body at the same time as launching into the air. So that Viper is just there to add to that mass and momentum, to add to the challenge of acceleration, but also to add to then that landing and deceleration. So again, the Viper's just there to enhance the process. And again, another great exercise. Now, we worked on acceleration. This one, the big demand is on that deceleration, being able to stop in a strong position. Again, I've got those opposite sides working. So I've got the hips rotating one way as the torso rotates the other, utilizing the Viper to enhance that ability. And then from there, increasing the coordination demand by going from single side to then alternate sides. Driving up tall, landing and sticking the Viper as well as sticking the body. And that Viper helps the feeling of that movement, the feeling of that stick of the movement. So from there, we've looked at some simple power exercises, and those power exercises have been taken from classic training and from stuff that I've learned from other coaches. And then all I've done is use the Viper to enhance that. So we've looked at power, and now let's take a good look at strength. For me, strength is about building resilience and bulletproofing the body so that I can harness the power that I've provided and the power that I'm putting into my training, but also, and into my running, but also I can then harness the endurance. I can make it more repeatable by scaling it through a period of strength. Now you'll notice that some of these exercises that I'm going to take you through now are more synergistic with running mechanics, and we have the ability with the strength work to begin to look at the constituent parts which make up the whole motion. So what you're going to see here with the strength exercises is that I'm going to start more local, and then I'm going to grow the movement to challenge it, make it more specific, or make it more global in its demand. So follow me through these next exercises now. We're going to be looking at, when you do this yourself or with your clients, we're looking at the ability to work for between 2 to 5 sets, between 5 and 15 repetitions, which is 10 to 60 seconds of work. And we're looking at really, like I say, the details of the movement with the ability to manipulate lots of things, to manipulate a variety of range of movements, of loading, of patterns, of Viper series and speeds in order to make it specific to the individual in front of you. So now let's take a little look at some strength exercises. So with this strength work, I'm going to be playing with some varied loads depending on how I'm using the Viper, the series of the Viper, and also how I'm holding it. I'm going to start off with a bit of posterior chain strength and stability. And we're starting with a hip hinged orientated exercise. So I'm going to change the load for this one. I'm going to take this first exercise up to my 12 kg Viper load now. Obviously, with Viper, we understand that it's not just about load, it's about how you utilize it. But for me and for these next couple of exercises, I feel that I get the most out of a 12 kilogram Viper. So we're going to start nice and simple. I'm going to be building that posterior strength. But I'm going to be building that posterior strength from a single leg position. We've already talked about running being a single leg activity. At no point are 2 feet in contact with the ground. So we're going to bear that in mind with our single leg posterior strength. Now, I'm going to start with my single leg balance. I'm going back to my left hip, trying to get the left hip, left leg, and also then up into my right hand, strengthened up through the back chain. So looking at, to begin with, nice and simple, looking at challenging my tilt a little more. This takes it on a level from our stability work by incorporating the slightly heavier Viper. And I can play around with the hold so that it suits the exercise and suits the range of motion. I'm going to a controlled range of motion, and I'm going through a nice, smooth, controlled speed here as well. What I can then start to do is I can start to play with the direction that I drive the Viper. Again, if I want to make it more authentic to running, I'm going to drive my Viper across my leading leg and across my body with the opposite hand to bring about those running mechanics of going opposite hand and opposite foot. I can really make sure that the other things are still working hard, like the other arm. That free arm is going through some running mechanics. And already as I go through this nice, slow, time under tension type rhythm, I'm starting to feel the backside of this leg beginning to load. From there, I could, as a coach, make this exercise and take this exercise on a level from the tilt position by making it more reactive. Now, why is reactive strength good? Well, reactiveness is exactly what is needed when we go on a run. We never know what's going to happen. If you're running in a race, you've got other competitors to run around and against and through. If you're running out on the roads and you're training, you've got all sorts of obstacles to navigate through on your run. So having that ability to react well through the backside of the body is definitely a great way of bulletproofing. And the way to do this, if I've got a coach with me, if I'm the client and I would have a coach with me, I'd have my coach tilting the Viper in different positions. And just as it begins to drop, then going for a catch. A single leg hinge catch. Now, obviously, I'm on my own today. But again, I can still play with this. I can tilt the Viper. Just as it goes, I can then catch it. That's providing that hip strength. And I can vary that up in all different directions to challenge my posterior strength. I can change the rate in which we do this. And if I had a coach with me, we could add calls into this game as well. We could make this as reactive as we like. But yet again, I'm still building that strength through the backside with our single leg tilt catches. From there, we're going to pop it into the hands. And I'm going to go keep it nice and simple to begin with a neutral hold of our 12 kg Viper. And now I can begin to work on what we call a dead shift. So we've got our hip hinge, our deadlift type pattern. What I'm going to do to that, after a couple of reps of just finding my feet, as it were, I'm then going to begin to drive the Viper across the body in that shift pattern whilst remaining stable and strong on one leg. If I wanted to, I could take that on a level, make sure I'm getting that hip extension in there by taking that little knee drive and that little holster of the Viper on one thigh. That could be a really good little coaching tool to make sure that people are finishing, your clients and yourself, that you finish that rep well. We're looking at that dead shift. And then with the dead shift, we could do a little bit of leave and retrieve work as well. So the point of our leave and retrieve work when it comes to running is there's moments of intensity and less intensity. There's moments where you need to be able to load the muscles, and there's moments when you need to take a little load off. That might relate to terrain. If I'm running uphill, I've actually, although I'm putting some muscular effort in, there's less impact going through the joints. When I'm running downhill, there's less muscular effort required, but there's certainly more impact through the joints and the fascia. So we need to be aware of that. So one way that I could begin to work that would be a simple leave and retrieve exercise. So I can start with the Viper in front of me in the single leg position, and then from here, I can grab the Viper, pull it towards me with that stability, and then put it away from me and leave it. So now I've got those moments of intensity, muscularly, and those moments without that intensity as well. I can start to then play with that in 3D. If I've got a coach with me, they could be calling some different directions. They could have some points on the floor, be using a mat like a Presidos mat, and going for different positions. And as you can see, as soon as you start to play around in 3D, the demand of the hips gets greater. So you've got some tilts, you've got the tilt catches, you've got those dead shifts, and you've got the leave and retrieves. As just a starting example of how I could start to build up that posterior strength that is vital to running, being with a single leg, and working, when possible, with that combination of those running arms. So from there, I'm going to take it from that one. I'm going to give you another example, but this time I'm going to look at the T-spine. So the T-spine, what does the thoracic spine need to do in order to run? Well, if I'm striding out, at the moment, I've got my hips going around to my left. I've got my torso going around to my right. So my torso, my spine is going through an amount of right rotation. But also, because I've just left the floor, my hips are hitched in the frontal plane as well. My hips are going through some motion in the frontal plane, which means I'm dropping my spine through one side through the hip. So if I was to bring this back, again, like we've explained, is that I'm going through right lateral flexion. So right rotation and right lateral flexion, to me, would mean it's a type 1 thoracic spine motion. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the Viper to this. I'm going to add the Viper so I can strengthen my thoracic spine type 1 rotation. And I'm going to start super local. I'm just going to set myself in a position. I'm going to use the rest of my body to make sure I wind it up so it can't be used, so that I develop specifically, as much as possible, isolate the thoracic spine motion. So what I'm doing is I'm sitting back, I'm making sure that my toes are grounded and flexed into the floor. I'm then sitting back from my knees, sitting back into my hips. Therefore, my ankles, feet, knees and hips now cannot contribute as much to the movement. From this position, I can then begin to go through that rotation exercise. And there's some different ways that I can hold the Viper. At the moment, I've just got a neutral hold in front of the body, going through that rotation and that side bend in the same direction. From there, I can then start to integrate the two movements a little more, make it flow, make it a bit more natural. This is a little tough for some people, then what I could do is take it into a front carry. So I'm now in a carry position. This might be the one that makes it a little easier to get through that motion. Remember that mobility and stability and strength, they're all combined, they all play with each other. So I need the mobility in order to get the strength. And then if I wanted to, I could take it on a level and I could start to reach a bit more with the Viper, round in those directions, taking my rotation one way and my lateral flexion in the same way. From there, I'm then going to take it to a half kneeling position. Begin to make it a little more authentic to running. I'm going to be working in the same direction. So because of that, I'm going to take my left foot forward. So my left foot is forwards. I'm now in the half kneel. I'm going to get on my toes on that back foot because we need that little bit of tension through the toes. And we need to work on mobility of the toes. We've already understood that the feet still going to work. So from here, I'm in the half kneel position. I've now got a little bit of hip motion allowed, a little bit more at the hips allowed, certainly some more at this front leg allowed, but I'm going to still go through those same movements. So I can start with my carry, go for that rotation and side bend. Start off by breaking it down into the two movements, and then maybe try and integrate it into a singular movement. Once I've got that far and I've got comfortable with that, again, I can then take my hands back to the Viper and I can then start to explore strength through a larger range of motion, going round the corner and reaching the Viper so that I get the reaction required at the T-spine. From there, I could then bring it back to a full standing split, bringing it back to a more global movement, bring myself into a strong running position. I'm going to get into full extension through the back leg. I'm going to start with my carry, and yet again, I'm providing a little more stability challenge now. I'm going to go through that same exercise pattern. And once I've got it down in the carry and I'm feeling comfortable with the carry, I can then take it to hands, and then I can begin to then take that reach with the hands as well. Full rotation and full side flexion, lateral flexion, all going on with that pattern, trying to stay and keep the weight in the front leg whilst doing it, keeping the stretch through the back leg to make it more specific to running. So hopefully from that, you've seen that I started down at a very local level for the T-spine and then built it back up to this more global exercise. And I guess the last point, if we wanted to, is that we could then start to add the step back in as well. So rotation across that leading leg to replicate what goes on when we run, and adding a little extra lateral flexion, because if I can get extra out of it now, when it comes to running, there won't be such a need to try and find it. And I can take it back to the hands, and then we're doing the full movement with that nice long runner's type step and the thoracic T1 shifts. So there you go, guys. There's a way that we can begin to start to look at specific areas. I looked at the hips, predominantly the posterior hip, and then I looked at the T-spine as well. So we can go after those different parts of the body as related to running, building it up as we go to make it a success at every stage. Hopefully that's got you to start thinking about how you can make strength more specific for runners or for yourself if you enjoy running, but also that what we learned today can then be reapplied to any sport available. So guys, there was some strength application utilizing the Viper for running.